This is extraordinary. When we ended last week, we were one Rashi and 3 verses away from completing the entire book of Genesis of Bereishit, 50 chapters with literally every single commentary of Rashi read. We only skipped portions of ones every once in a while that were pure math, but we really did everything else. Raise your hand if you remember studying the Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, with me here. Who was part of it then? So those are intrepid students who've been with this class really off and on for 11 years. And Jessica and Sherry, and there might be someone else, I'm not sure, who's on it for about 9 years before. And now we're going to do it because we want to study today. What we're going to do is we're going to study the Rashi at the same pace that we normally do.
There goes the Siyum.
There goes the Siyum. I'm going to recite the. We're going to dedicate. I'm going to recite the Siyum prayers. We're going to start studying Shmot, and then we're going to celebrate. Mm-hmm. So we have 2 dedications. One for Refuah and one for Zikaron. So, Sal?
So I just got a call this morning about a long time friend of us at Accidental Talmudist. Her name is Donna Smith. She was just admitted to the hospital this morning. I told her that this class was having its Siyum after all these years. And she actually, she's a ger, and she just took on a new Hebrew name, her Hebrew name, this morning.
Wow. To
be dedicated in this class. And so please, God, in honor of this class, give a refuah shlema, speedy and complete, to Devorah Basara.
Amen. Thank you, Sal. Matt, will you say a few words?
Okay, thanks. My sister-in-law, Donna's sister, died last month at the age of 62. She was a mainstay of her congregation in Irvine. She was famous for her hospitality. Hundreds of people came to their house for Shabbat. She was also like a guide and a model who were finding their ways back into Judaism or practice, Jewish practice. And she was about to make Aliyah to Israel, where her kids are, her son and grandchildren, but unfortunately, anyhow, so she died, and we buried her there in Yerushalayim last month. And if anyone is interested in weird anthropological observations about burials in Yerushalayim, I can talk about it later. It's really interesting, very different.
So for those who couldn't hear that, who are watching, one of our class members, Matt, is dedicating some of the study to his sister-in-law. Remind me her name?
Oh, sorry, Leah Bat Mordechai Ubracha.
Leah Bat Mordechai Ubracha, who passed away really on the eve of her making Aliyah, and she was a tzadeket, committed to Hachnasat Orchim, and we say Yehi Zichra Baruch, and our learning today will be in her memory as well. Okay, so we are on chapter 50 of Bereishit in the Maftir Aliyah. I think we read verse 23 last week, Kaf Gimel, but Dafka didn't do the Rashi because it's the last Rashi. Right. And then we have a few more verses to do of Shmot. I can't tell if which would be more anticlimactic, to finish the last Rashi and then just learn 3 verses of Torah, or to finish the verse of Torah and finish our Siyum on Rashi's last comment, which is only 4 words long. Raise your hand if you want to have the Siyum be on the last word of Rashi versus the last word of Shmot. Raise your hand if you want it to be on Shmot. Raise your hand if you don't care. Rashi wins. So we're gonna reread verse Kaf Gimel, verse 23. We're gonna read through the next few verses. At a normal pace. We'll study them and explore them as they need to be studied, but Rashi is quiet on them, and then we'll go back and read Rashi in verse 23. So Rashi, verse 23, Vayar Yosef le'Ephraim b'nei Shileshim. Yosef saw through Ephraim, the children of the 3rd generation. And by the way, remember we discussed Shileshim last week? It was in Parshat Yitro. So it's not as uncommon as I thought, that it really does mean the children of the 3rd generation. It's just an interesting construction. It looks like it's created from a PL verb, that's shilesh, but that's what it means. Gam b'nei machir ben Menashe yuldu al birkei Yosef. We don't know exactly how to translate the gam here, some kind of an intensifier. Also, now we move over to Menashe. So Yosef had unnamed great-grandchildren through Ephraim, and we now have the specific way in which he had great-grandchildren through Menashe. The children of Machir, who was the son of Menashe, so the children of Yosef's grandson Machir, Yuldu, passive, were born. Strange phrase, and it's the phrase on which Rashi will give his last comment in the book of Genesis. Al, upon, near, adjacent to, Birkei, the knees of Yosef. What else does Birkei mean? What else is the root? Bracha, right? So let's leave that untreated for the moment, right? By the way, etymologically, we're not sure. It's probably the fact that the reason why bracha and birkayim are the same thing is that when you bow for a blessing, you bow on your birkayim. The verb, if you're making your camel sit, I think it's lahavrich otam. To you ever see how a camel bends with its knee? To have it knee itself, right? So the way we prostrate ourselves in a bracha and a blessing is through birkayim, and that might be the etymological reason why blessing and knee is the same thing. And here, the pshat seems to be knee, even though we don't know what it means, but blessing is somehow built into the word, okay? So, we're going to go forward with that because we dealt with that verse last week. Let's read the next verse of Torah. Suchetzroni, Vayomer Yosef. As loud as you can so we can get over here.
Vayomer Yosef elechav anochi met, ve'elohim pakod yifkod etchem, v'ha'ela etchem min ha'aretz.
Keep going.
Min ha'aretz hazot, el ha'aretz asher nishba la'Avraham le'Yitzchak ve'Yaakov.
If this were Saturday Night Live in the 70s, I could do the news for the Vayomer Yosef. Okay, try to translate, Sue.
And God and Yosef said to his brothers, my master Anochi.
I
Anochi met. And Yosef said to his brothers, Anochi, I died.
Right, so met seems to be a present tense verb. It can also be the noun describing the one who has experienced that present tense verb. So, probably Anochi met ought to be translated as I am dying. It can't be that I have died. First of all, that would be matati. That might have be turned to mati, right? I am dying. It could be I am a dead one, right? I'm a mate. A mate is a deceased.
I'm a goner.
I'm a goner. Right? Something like that, right? Does any one of the translations that you have translated interestingly?
No.
I am about to die.
I'm about to die. Okay, that's the goner mode.
Is a mate a corpse?
A mate is a corpse.
Right, so it's like I am a corpse is another way to think of it.
I'm like a living corpse. Mm-hmm. Everett Fox says, I am dying, which is as close to the pshat of the word. It's a present tense verb that in some ways you can't really say it and have it make sense because dying happens in one micro moment, right? So he can't actually be dying. It's got to be something approaching it. What do you got?
Silverman's got it exactly right. And Joseph said to his brethren, I die.
I die. Right, and if a Shakespearean character said that, it would make sense. I die, right? Hark, I die, right? So it's clearly announcing that it's coming, but it's not actually happening because he's saying it. Okay?
Maybe. If a soul is leaving its body and they're having a very powerful shared death experience, it can actually be happening.
Uh-huh. Right, except that he does continue to talk as a person. Okay,
that's the anticlimax.
Who's got a hand? Alan, as loud as you can.
Yes, it says Anochi, which is most unusual. Normally would be Ani.
Right.
Anochi, like we did in Yitro, says Yitro, talking about God giving the Ten Commandments. Perhaps the extra chaf is in there is like kid, as if I'm about to die. I'm like a dead person.
Wonderful. If everyone got right, the Anochi is a larger, more formal version of I. plenty of medieval and Hasidic commentaries on why the Ten Commandments begin with Anochi and not Ani. I think I just gave a Josh on that somewhere, but I forgot where it was. Oh, and Rabbi Schatz's installation. And what Alan is adding wonderfully, the difference between Anochi and Ani is the chaf. The chaf, which means as if, sort of, right? When it's like kinega is what you say when you're announcing that you may have tzara'at. I have something like a blemish on me. Okay? Keep translating. Velohim.
Velohim pakad yifkod etchem, and God will pakad yifkod. Pakod yifkod.
Yeah.
Will track after you. Will I don't know what the pakod is.
So pakod is one of those pluripotent roots that means lots of different things. Like nasa can mean to carry and to bear and to tolerate and to forgive.
I imagine a thing like tick, 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 tick.
So a pakid in modern Hebrew does that. Lifkod means to count. You have that in Unatana Tokef. And it also means to remember. Varonai pakadat Sarah. When God is pokading Sarah before Yitzchak is born, God is remembering the promise. We could go back etymologically and wonder why remembering and counting is related to one another. The doubling here is that wonderful verily, right? God will verily pakod you. So it could be either. God will continue to count you, think of you, this notion of God, counting the stars in the sky and giving them each names, right? And remember that, by the way, when we get to the first line of Shemot. Or God will remember you. Matt?
Alter says, it renders it as surely, God will surely single you out.
Single you out. That's so interesting.
Stretch.
Yeah.
It works.
Everett Fox, God will take account, yes, account of you. That's actually wonderful because the taking account in English combines counting and remembering. Notice it. It's wonderful. Well done, Everett. Well done. If you're watching, Everett Fox, we approve of your translation. Okay? So God will verily take account of you, remember you. Etchem is the plural you. And in what way? Yosef continues in this prophecy.
And will bring you up from the land.
Good. Good. Already aliyah is built into the notion of leaving Egypt, right? The verb is not vehotze, right? But vehe'la, okay?
And to the land that was sworn to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov.
Right. So well, let me ask it as a question rather than a statement. What do you find, now that we understand the words mean, what do you find evocative or interesting about this verse? What might Rashi have picked up on had Rashi not gotten bored at the end of Bereishit? What is interesting, or is there something interesting, about upon Yosef's death, after having reconciled with his brothers, this particular prophecy of God will remember you and take you up out of here? Marshall?
Is it Yosef's death or Yaakov's death?
Yosef. Yaakov died, was buried in after that celebration, Gor and Hatad. Yes?
Well, I think the fact you made reference to Pakod Yifkod Etchem, and at the end of it says, to reference to Abraham. So you have the tying together the beginning of the Jewish people, and here another transition point.
Good. So one way of understanding what's interesting about this verse is that if Bereishit begins twice, right? Bereishit bara Elokim et Hashem ha'aretz and Lech lecha mi'artzecha, right? The story of the people of Bereishit begins with Abraham. The story of the world begins with Bereishit. We are ending Bereishit by invoking Abraham. What else is interesting, Yonatan?
Maybe Ava nitchakma lo pen yirbe ve'ala min haaretz. So reference back to Paro himself saying, lest they will la'alot min ha'eretz Mitzrayim, and here it is, the prophecy fulfilled itself, and the Israelites are leaving Egypt.
Right, so not referencing back, but referencing forward to what Pharaoh's going to be concerned about. And I would add to that, again, it's very hard for us to read the story without forgetting what we know about the story. Right now, how are things for Yosef and his family in Egypt?
Good.
Wonderful. They're in paradise. They've left Canaan that has no resources. Their brother is the vice chancellor. They even had permission to leave to bury their loved ones up in Canaan. They're living in one of the greatest exiles that we know of, and somehow the book or the character Yosef or God or some combination of them puts right in at the very end of Bereishit, this is temporary. This exile is meant, however good it is temporary. God will remember you and take you out as if they're saying, oh, it's so bad here. It's so good here. And God will remember you and take you out because this is not where you were meant to be.
So, in some senses, Yosef is kind of the quintessential Zionist, because here he's lived pretty much his entire life in Egypt, has reached a very high stature in Egypt, and yet, when I die, take me back to the motherland.
Right. I'm unmoored from where I'm supposed to be, no matter how pleasant this is. Larry and then Barry. Barry.
So I could be wrong, and you could tell me that I'm wrong in Shemot. But we don't talk about Alita mi Mitzrayim. We talk about Yitziat mi Mitzrayim. And here we're using the Aliyah sense of going up. I don't see any commentaries about that. So my commentary is Yosef wasn't foreseeing the 40 years. He thought we were going to go directly up to the land.
Aliyah.
So, and had we done so, we'd be celebrating Pesach as Alita mi Mitzrayim and not
Aliyat Mitzrayim.
Aliyat Mitzrayim and not Yitziat mi Mitzrayim.
Right. So colloquially, we think of Exodus. First of all, the word Exodus means leaving, not ascending. But we think of it as Yitziat Mitzrayim. The verbs that God will use in I think the chapter 5 or 6 of Shemot, the 4 verbs that become the base of the 4 cups of wine, even though there were 5 verbs, v'hodseiti, v'ga'alti, v'hitzalti, then another one. None of them is the eleti, right? So none of the verbs that God uses discusses aliyah, but Yosef uses aliyah. So you're saying that Yosef just predicted straight shot.
Didn't foresee it.
Barry and then Tova, and then Alexandra.
So the lead in Yosef is the last of the Sephirot structure. So the end of prophecy for the moment ends with him, and his finger is pointing to the future. And as you commented already, that this good life that we live now is temporary.
Yeah.
And what's before us, we don't know, but what's before us is to go up to what's been promised to us.
Right.
But this good life is temporary.
And the way the story has unfolded is that all of Yosef's prophecies, even his intemperate and probably the ones that were not properly shared with the people listening, came true, right? So the Bereishit is also ending with yet another prophecy from someone who, there's a great line in Andrew Lloyd Webber about Yosef saying he's never been wrong. It's just that I have not been wrong before, right? So that narcissism, accurate narcissism of Yosef, that he's correct, but he's boasting he's correct. So we can feel confident about this prophecy. Tova, then Alexandra.
As it turns out, building nicely on Barry, you could also see it as Yosef either prophetically or consciously saying, yes, we have it incredibly good here, but what is really going to elevate us
Wonderful.
in a moral sense
Great.
is going to be the return to our land.
Great. Wherever we are, we're in Ma'amakim, and there's an aliyah to come. Wonderful. Alexandra, then Vered.
I'm rethinking this. I don't think it's accurate anymore, but it's at first it seemed to me that he was continuing the speaking nicely to them and talking to their hearts, and that I was wondering, like, are they afraid that he's leaving them? Is this like a continuation of that message? I'm not here to take care of you, but God will eventually. Great. Vered?
I'd like to talk for one moment about the Vehela that can be understood going north geographically, not necessarily by going up, from Egypt going up, not necessarily in the sense of Aliyah. And when we talk about Aliyah in other times, we're going to Israel going up in the madrigot on the levels of Dusha.
Yes, right. That it may be up geographically, cartographically, or as Toph was also saying, whatever we're experiencing here, there is a aliyah from this.
From there.
Yonatan, can you see if you can reconnect the Zoom on Rabbi Schatz's computer? Something happened there. Matt and Leonard?
Just a question to understand the picture of this. He's speaking to his brothers, but he's 110 years old, and he's by far not the oldest brother.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Are they all? Doesn't say all his brothers.
Right.
So some of them must have been.
But he died young.
Yeah. Right. By the next verse, which we're about to get to, it's a more generic, the children of Israel, which may mean the actual children of Yaakov or the tribe. But you're right. In this verse, there's more than one living brother. There's more than one living brother. Correct.
Yeah. Maybe it's like the next generation.
Right.
Yeah, I was wondering if it could be more generally used.
Leonard, and then I want to read the next verse.
Okay, so here we have the Pakod and Yivkod. And in Shmot, notice I brought the next book in.
Yes.
In Shmot, in Parshat Shmot, 3:16, it says, I'm abbreviating it slightly here, but it says, Ve'amarta alehem Adonai le'mor pakod pakadati etchem.
Aha.
Same words exactly.
Very good. Very good. So not the aliyah, but God will
Surely remember.
will verily remember you or verily take account of you. Great. Rick.
It's in the next sentence too.
It's right. So let's get to the next sentence. Okay.
Let's read it.
Matt, do you want to read it, Rick?
Me? Sure.
So we're on chapter 50, verse 25, the penultimate verse of the book.
Vayashba Yosef et bnei Yisrael le'mor.
Oh, but pause. I'm sorry. If you go back to the uncleus of the verse we read, as we're trying to figure out which use of pakod is the one that's intended. So look at the uncleus in 24. Va'amar Yosef la'achohi. Joseph said to his brothers, Ana ma'et, I am dying. Midkar dechir yatchon. In Aramaic, the Dalid is a Hebrew Zion. So Midkar is Mizacher Zachor. So Onkelos read pakod specifically as remember, not an accounting. And I'm certain that when that verse pakod is used in Sefer Bamidbar about a census, Onkelos will translate the verb in a different way. Right? So he's making a choice here. This is remembrance, not counting. Sorry, keep reading. 25.
Start over or keep reading?
Well, start over. Vayashba.
Vayashba Yosef et bnei Yisrael le'mor. Pakod yivkod Elohim etchem v'halitem et atzmotai mizeh. So translate. And Joseph, the English is adjured. So he made them swear.
Right. It's the causative. It's kind of like the he feel of the root shin bet ayin, meaning to swear. So I guess he adjured them. Right. He forced them to take an oath. He forced them to promise. Okay.
Specifically, the children of Israel saying the same thing before.
Right.
But Elohim.
What is he asking them to promise to do?
Take his bones.
Take his bones. Yes.
Right. It seems that he adjured them, given the way I would translate it if it was loosely is given the fact that God will indeed remember you in the future. At that moment, this is where the oath begins. You, not God. You better take my bones out of here. God will manage the entire, like the macro process. Don't forget my bones here. With another use of the word aliyah, right? My bones will need to get an aliyah from here, just like we just did for Dad in the beginning of this chapter, right? Mm-hmm. Questions on that verse?
Well, just if I could continue, the order of the words are different though than the sentence before. Here it's Pakod, Yivkod, and then Elohim. Before we had Elohim first, the fancier trope, and then Pakod as a fancy trope, and then Yivkod et Ham.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, right. So in our previous verse, the subject came before the verb, Elohim, Pakod, Yivkod, and here it's actually the more common, Pakod, Yivkod, Elohim, the subject following the verb. Anything else on the verse that's interesting, Larry?
Well, the parallel with 24. So in verse 24, he's saying that God will remember them and bring them up. And in verse 25, you could interpret it as saying, and God will remember, when God remembers you, he's remembering me and bringing me, my bones, up at the same time.
Right, except for the verb v'ha'alitem, which is you plural.
Right.
In other words, the oath is attached to what he's asking them to do, and the asking them to do is the v'ha'alitem. You bring them up. Does that contradict what you're saying, or no?
No, because he's still going to be brought up. Not by God directly, but by them.
Okay.
But he's being brought up by God's action. And I'm struck by the fact that it's exactly, Rick commented the trouble is different.
Right, but the verbs are the same.
The verbs are exactly the same.
Correct.
Because in the first time it's a prophetic statement. The second time it's a causative connection.
It's just an interesting parallel. You could actually map it out, right? So God will verily remember. God will verily remember. God will bring you up.
Right.
You bring me up. Right?
Yeah.
Stevie?
Yeah, I mean, just compared to the verse in Beshalach, right, the word itchem is missing, even though it seems to be an otherwise verbatim quote.
Say more.
Right, that in Parshat Beshalach, when Moses does grab the bones, right, it says, Ki hashpeh hashpia bnei Yisrael limor ha'kod yivkod Elohim etchem v'alichem et atum zam mizeh itchem. So I guess it's really comment on that verse that has this extra word.
You mean when the Torah remembers this oath?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. There's right. Take the bones up with you.
Right. Right. Tova and then Stuart.
I think there's an interesting completion in that he is having the descendants of his brothers effectively swear that they will bring him back to the land that brothers effectively sent him from.
Right. Right. God will bring all of you up. You sent me here. You bring me up from here. Wonderful, Tova. That's great. That's great. Stuart, Marshall, then I want to point out the word that I think is the most interesting word in the verse we haven't discussed yet. Yes.
And I'm just trying to incorporate Tova's comment into this because that's really very interesting. But I'm trying to figure out what exactly is the nature of God's promise to remember these brothers? Because in verse 24, it appears to be a declarative statement that God will remember them, Bnei Israel, and bring them up out of the land. And in verse 25, it seems to somehow, it's repeated, which is odd, but then it's somehow, there is some nature of causation that wasn't there the first time. Why doesn't it just say, at least in the English, and Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel that you shall carry them up, carry my bones out of the land. Why doesn't it just say that? Because that's what makes sense.
Right.
Right? So
the way Everett Fox resolves that, because he's sensitive to the same problem, he adds in a when, suggesting that the repetition of the God taking account of you is the moment when this oath will have to be acted upon. So the way Everett Fox translates the verse is, Yosef had the sons of Israel swear, that's how he deals with the cause of it. He had them swear, saying, when God takes account of you, when? Bring my bones up from here. So I've just prophesied that this exile, which you don't think of as an exile yet, will eventually end. And when it ends, I'm making you swear that your descendants bring me up. So I don't know if that answers that, but that's how he resolves what the repetition in those two verses. Marshall, Sal.
Well, from the beginning of the story about Yosef, we have a story of separation from his brothers. And it seems to me that if you take these two verses here, using Alter's understanding of Hakod Yivkod as to single out, I think what we're talking about here is a sense of reconciliation and don't leave me behind. In the first verse, God will surely single you out. Here, Joseph is speaking to his brothers, and take you up from this land. Didn't say me, but take you up from this land, the land he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, when God indeed singles you out, you shall take up my bones from this place. I've been separated from you for too long. I don't want to be left behind. So make sure that I remain with you.
So a book that seemed to end with lots of fractures, there's unification happening here. Sal, and then my favorite word of the verse.
Well, like you say, we're so familiar with the continuation in the next book that we're just running past an assumption that we've made. I mean, there's already a precedent when Jacob died in Egypt that they brought him out. Why isn't Joseph being buried in Israel now? Why is it a given that he's going to remain here?
That's great.
So perhaps, okay, he's such an important personage in Egypt. He saved Egypt from famine. They can't just take a national hero and relocate him out of there.
Right.
But then
And I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, then you can continue.
Yeah.
And notice what the last word of the book of Bereishit is.
Exactly.
Which we're about to read, right? So the last word of the book of Bereishit indicates where they are, and I hadn't thought about it. And like where Yosef could have been was where his father was. Great, keep going.
And likewise, we just take it as a given that they're going to stay there for several hundred years. But they went to Egypt because of a famine.
Right.
Famine's long gone.
Right.
There's no reason for them to be in Egypt when they could be in a land that was promised to their great-grandfather and their grandfather and their father.
Right.
So when we talk about God will surely remember you, it's because you need remembering.
Right.
Because you have forgotten. You've already forgotten,
right.
Where you're supposed to be. And now conditions are going to gradually match your depressed spiritual state.
We never like blaming the victim, and there's a mild critique here, maybe, of how comfortable they've gotten. My cousin, whose name I mentioned here and there in the community, Dr. Israel Eldad, who was Menachem Begin's closest friend in Poland. They escaped Poland together. They played chess on the backs of trains as they made their way from Poland to Palestine. He was in the Lehi before the war, and then was a professor for many, many years in Israel. A staunch right-wing Zionist, and a huge believer in Jewish nationhood. And he had a great series of lectures, and it's calendar appropriate right now, on Purim, and why it was very hard for him to celebrate the holiday of Purim. Because he thought of Purim, and he understood this was anachronism, as kind of a pro diaspora anti-Zionist holiday. Why? Because historically, it's happening at a time when the Cyrus the Great, the Persian king, had already defeated the Babylonians. The exile in Babylonia could have ended. Some of it did. They went back to Palestine, and some Jews stayed and became Persian. Right? They stayed and they named their children after Persian gods. Right? Mordechai is probably from Marduk. Esther is probably from Ashtarti. They participated in non-Jewish beauty pageants to see who could sleep with the king. And they got into trouble in a diaspora community when, according to my cousin, they could have been back in Palestine.
Contemporaneous with Ezra?
Yeah, right. They could have been there. So he would read the Megillah and shout at them, what are you doing there? What are you doing in Shushan? How do you want me to celebrate your miraculous redemption when you shouldn't have been in a situation where you could have been victimized, right? That's very easy. It's a very harif interpretation. But what's happening more mildly here is the book is ending with the book kind of saying about to the characters, you're in Egypt. Joseph is buried in Egypt. Famine over. What are you doing here? Barry.
We had discussed this, that on the funeral for Yaakov, the Egyptian army was in back of us as we went there, and the return, they were
Great.
in back of us.
Correct.
Sure, and the children didn't go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Kind of
we
sealing
were-
us in.
We were prisoners.
Yeah.
We weren't free to leave yet.
By the way, my cousin thought the same thing about all of us.
No doubt.
Right? Like what he would say. I mean, like he loves us. My family would say, "What are you doing?" Like I understand what you were doing in the 1920s, 30s, 10s, 1880s. You couldn't really, but what are you doing? You there's nothing stopping you from ending your diaspora.
But
Right?
it's too good.
It's comfortable here, right? And we've created sanctity here. Matt, and then we're going to read the last verse of Bereishit.
Well, in Egypt, they have the Nile all the time. So, but if you go back, the famine is over, as Al says, yes, but there can always be another famine
Great.
in Palestine. But there's always going to be water in the Nile.
Yeah. But that's because they haven't really explored the Golan Heights yet, and the Banyas runs. Right. Okay.
I just want to follow up with the clock, 9:15. Like
Okay.
sentence of Rashi.
Okay. The last verse of Genesis. Carol.
Vayamat Yosef ben Mea Eser Shanim, Vayachantu Oto, Vayisem Ba'aron B'Mitzrayim.
Right. And a very, 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 very precise Torah reading of it would and a tikkun would show this. This does not, that the kamatz under the mem is a kamatz katan because the stress on the yud, so it's vayamot. It's vayamot Yosef ben mea ve'eser shanim vayachantu do vayisem ba'aron b'Mitzrayim. See if you can translate. He had already said ani mate, but now the text says what? He died, yeah, and?
He was 110 years old.
Right?
They embalmed him.
Yep.
And they put him in a coffin in Egypt.
It's an astounding last verse of this story. Like it's like they entombed Yosef and all of Bnei Israel in Mitzrayim.
Yes.
And when we lane it in shul, it goes right into chazak, and then the maftir aliyah. So we never linger on it. They buried him and entombed him as an Egyptian in Egypt, and the doors closed.
So the note here that 110 years is actually the Egyptian ideal for long life.
Yes?
As opposed to our version of 110.
Yes. Interesting. I did not know that. And because of this is understood, or reverse?
He implies that this is the last Egyptian touch, since this is the ideal Egyptian lifespan, as against 120 in the Hebrew tradition.
Got it. Well, I'll take one or two comments on the verse, and then we'll go back to the Rashi. Any comments on the verse?
No comment. Moving on.
Yosef dies, 110 years. They embalmed him. They sealed him in a coffin in Egypt. Okay, Rick.
I want to know what the word was that you
Yeah.
wanted to say.
Oh,
Right.
mizeh,
Oh, yeah.
right? And you will bring up my bones
Out of this.
out of this. It's such an interesting this. This is nothing. Like it's so non-specific. It doesn't say mi po, mi kan, mi mitzrayim, mizeh, from this. Like I hear it as a sneer. Take me out of all of this. No, could have just been zeh. Could just mean this place, but it's an interesting zeh. It's because zeh is such an uninteresting word. It's an interesting zeh.
Minor comment.
Yeah.
I'll bet all of your translations say that he was put into a coffin.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right.
But it's not. It's ba
The.
Aaron.
Yeah. Good. Right, but it's a definite article in.
Cheskuni is the credit Cheskuni for that. So.
Habeit b'kamatz lamelcha ki b'chayav b'chruhu lo. Right, they had already picked out and prepared his coffin for him. Right, so it was specified in the coffin that they had chosen.
So the coffin's obviously sarcophagus. right?
Yeah.
And the sarcophagus is going into a particular burial spot. He's already been.
Correct.
He's
He
already
bought
been
his
moved.
plot.
He's part of Egyptian, like Saul was saying before.
Yeah.
He's already part of. That part of him is Egyptian.
Yeah. And because so much, the first 20 chapters, first 12 or 14 chapters, the book of Shemot, will be about what happens in the quagmire that the Israelites got themselves into in Mitzrayim and how they left it. It's just wonderful that the last word of Bereishit could have been Elohim, it could have been, Kamo, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Who knows what it could have been? It's Mitzrayim. Okay, let's go back and read the last Rashi.
Going back to what Larry said, metaphorically it could be, and he was put in the coffin known as Mitzrayim.
Whoa.
Ba'aron Mitzrayim.
Joel. That's it.
Right. If you see the trup on Ba'aron, it's tipcha.
Yeah.
Right? It's so Vayisim Ba'aron, 2-word phrase. They placed him in the coffin, Mitzrayim. It could have been Vayisem Tipcha.
Right.
Sometimes the Tipcha and the Mercha are switched, and they placed him, Ba'aron Mitzrayim.
The coffin of Mitzrayim.
Yeah. Vayisem Ba'aron b'Mitzrayim chazak v'nichazek. Back to Rashi on verse 23. This wonderful odd phrase. What does it mean that when we're being told that Yosef saw his great grandchildren, that at least the children of the son of Manasseh were born on his knees? Before we read the Rashi, look back to chapter 30. Look back to chapter 30, verse 3. Chapter 30, verse 3. Lamed Gimel on page Nun Chet in our books. What?
30 verse 3. We were both on to chapter 30 on that.
Good. Okay. So, way back to Vayetze.
We're never going to finish.
We're going to finish. Yaakov is angry. That Rachel cannot produce child. Vayichar af Yaakov berachel. His rage inflamed on Rachel. Vayomer, and he said, Hatachat Elohim anochi. Am I in place of God? Meaning, can I? If you can't get pregnant, do I have divine power such that I can make it happen? Asher manami mech privaten, that I have held back from you the fruit of your womb. Vatomer, and Rachel said, Hine, behold, amati Bilha. Look at Bilha. Bo eleha, come in to her, be intimate with her. Vateled al birkai, and she will give birth upon my knees. So what does al birkai mean here?
Means that I'd always assumed that literally she would sit in the lap, so that she'd be elevated, and in giving birth that way, that was like Rachel was giving birth.
Right. So it could mean both of those things simultaneously. Let this child be born. Like, it can't be born from my womb, but it can be born with my knees right there. But I'm getting credit for it. It will be accounted to me. Okay? And because ve'ibaneh gam anochi mimena, and therefore I will be built through her. So here,
I will have a son through her.
I will be bend.
Yeah, no, I know what I mean.
So
I always understood it as I will be built up. You think as I will.
I think it's the same thing.
It's both.
Yeah.
But clearly,
I'll take Rabbanayach ela bonayach. Right. So he said. So here she's saying, the child's being born on my berech means that I'll be right there, and it'll somehow accrue to me. Back here, pshat, they were born al birkei Yosef. Like it somehow doesn't mean that he was the midwife, right? Or the mid-husband. It somehow could suggest that they were born in a way that Yosef line continued. Remember how he claimed Ephraim and Manasseh, right?
Jacob did.
Jake, right? So that these are claimed, children in the lineage. Joel, Rachel.
For anybody who's seen The Handmaid's Tale, it's the same sort of thing where a lot of the women are infertile, so they have handmaids to give birth for them. And in order for the matriarch to feel like she's actually giving birth, the handmaid will sit in her lap as she's giving birth, so the matriarch can feel like she's actually doing it.
Wow. Wow. Rachel?
I was thinking of the legal and social status, that when Rahel says, take Bilhah, and this will be as my child, that those children would have the status of being born from a wife, not a concubine.
Right.
And that Yosef, in his exalted position in Egypt, to claim these children is to give them more social status than had he not said it.
Great. And now Rashi says something totally different. Right? So Rashi's last comment on Yosef basically is quoting someone else, but changes how we understand the verse. So who was just reading? Carol? Al Birkei Yosef. You get the honor. Everyone see where we are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Katargumo, Gadlan, Bain, Birkah. Gidlan, Bain, Birkah. As Unclus says, they grew up, or
It's probably pointed as Gidlan, Hu Gidel Otam.
he raised them between his knees, or his blessings.
Right. So what do we think Onkelos meant by that? And now what do we think that Rashi is, what's Rashi's sermon by saying the best way to understand this verse is the way Onkelos did? Go ahead.
It's like that Pirkei Avos, all my life I've lived at the feet of the sages. So these kids grew up around Joseph and absorbed his teaching and values directly.
Right. In the verse itself, it seems to be about their birth. Rashi says, don't perseverate on their birth. Perseverate on what's happened post-birth. Barry and then Rick.
What was that?
What?
Perseverate?
Perseverate? To overly focus on a specific thing is to perseverate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what Rashi is saying in Bereishit on this, is, and I will rear them. That's what Onkelos is saying. I will rear them.
Right, and he did rear them. So it's not just that, right? The Pshat seems to see at the very end of his life, he was blessed. He got to see the face of his great-grandchildren. Rashi's saying that what Onkelos is saying is no. He got to continue to raise, Josephize, bring into the clan that generation, and they played and grew up around his feet, around his knees, right? That somehow so then we have to have the question: what does it say that this is Rashi's last commentary in the book of Genesis? What's if this were his final sermonette, and it's only 4 words, that's not even his words, it's Onkelos' words. What's he saying? What's he saying? We know what he's saying, but what is he saying? Rick.
The Onkelos that I see is Rabbi Yosef. Is that right?
Yeah, which is it's a rare,
like Rav, like Rabbi.
Right. He sort of reared them spiritually. Yes.
Like a rabbi teaches.
Yes. Diane.
So, back in chapter 48, verse 12, Yotzei Yosef. This is when Yosef, in fact, adopts Ephraim the Manasseh.
Right.
Right. V'yotzei Yosef otam me'im birkav. So
right.
it's the same image.
Right. Right.
So he's like adopting them.
He's adopting them. They're close to him. They're between his knees. So there is kind of an image of birth. We don't have to perseverate on it, but the exodus from Egypt is also a birthing moment, right? So we're hearing about the birth of the next generation between Joseph's knees, as it were, as a being born into a family, and the way that the Israelites will leave Egypt is being born through this the split Red Sea, which is also a birth image, right? So it's another precursor to the Yetziat Mitzrayim that's going to happen from the slavery that we don't even know about yet. Rachel and then Barry. Quick, because I want to finish up.
Does it strike anyone else as weird that Yosef is giving birth and not his wife?
It's spiritual.
With Rahel and Bilhah, it's women who give birth.
Well, he's not giving birth. The kids were born on his knees. Rearing. And so either it's basic intimacy, he was there, he claims them, or as Rashi says, he's rearing them, which I read. Like I read Rashi's sermonette here. I don't know if I'm right? It could just be that Rashi didn't think anything about it. He was going along, and then he went to Shemot chapter 1, verse 1. Or, one second, Barry, or Rashi knows that he's finishing a book, right? And he's finishing a book with an image of a great-grandfather teaching his children Torah, as it were. Right? He finishes this book about the story of the people that Rashi is descendant of, saying, you want to know what this means? It meant that the great-grandchildren were learning the Torah and the story of Yosef. And perhaps that is what is going to make the prophecy of the Israelites coming out as a people even worthwhile.
That's how you stay alive in a coffin.
Yes. Let's go. All right, so the hands that are up are the last of the hands that are up. So it'll be Rosemary, Barry, and Matt, and then we're ending.
I feel the three last commentaries of Rashi is wrapping up the chapter. He's started with showing the teaching, like brothers should be fine together. Then he teaches you forgive them, you live with them. And then as he's living in a period in France when Templars come back from Jerusalem, anti-Semitism starts, he brings the candles and he says, and he maybe predicts even 45, even nowadays. He says even if everybody wants to blow it, they can't, because Joseph has the children on his laps.
Oh, you're talking about the image from last week of the 11 candles on the one.
I'm taking all the three images of 1921-23, that he's giving the future, predicting. He's like a prophet saying everything will be fine, even if they want to kill us, even if they want to do anything.
Barry, then Matt.
So I want to answer your question, how do we wrap this rearing in the imagery, how we're ending in Mitzrayim, in the coffin? And so we have the story ending where God is with the people in this coffin of Egypt, and we're rearing in the birthing process. The seed is going to be maturing during these next difficult years for the birth of going up to Egypt. So that's the ending. That's what rearing has to do here.
Great. Matt, last comment.
I guess I want to remember that earlier in the class we were talking about knees and blessings. It would be nice to think of this, that he was born, that this great-grandchild was born amidst the blessings of
Great. Right. Your K Yosef, the brachot of Yosef. Very quick.
It's the responsibility of each of us to transmit the story to the next generation.
Yeah. And it ends with that happening. Right? You're about, and we know, and Rashi knows that we know, they're all about to go into slavery. And they're all about to go into slavery together, teaching this story, which the only way it has a possibility of emerging. Please rise. Hadran alach Sefer Bereishit v'hadrach alan. Datan alach Sefer Bereishit v'datach alan. Lo nitneshe minach Sefer Bereishit v'lo titneshe minan. La ba'alma hadein v'la ba'alma da'ate. We revere you and we will return to you the book of Genesis and Rashi's commentary. Chanina bar Papa. No, that's only for Talmud. ותצאצאי עמך בישראל כולנו ידי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. מאוהבי תחכמני מצוותיך כי לעולם היא לי בי תמים בחוקיך למען לא אבוש, לעולם לא אשכח פיקודך כי איתני. ברוך אתה ה' למדני חוקיך, אמן, 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 צל ואין. מודים אנחנו לך Lefanecha na Eloheinu v'Eloheinu shesamta chalkenu miyoshvei beit hamidrash v'lo samta chalkenu miyoshvei kranot. Thank you, God, for making us students of Torah and not those who waste their time watching like movies and stuff. Sha'anu mashkimim v'hei mashkimim. Anu mashkimim l'divrei Torah v'hei mashkimim l'divrei kelim.
They run and we run.
Anu amelim v'hei amelim. Anu amelim u'mekablim schar v'hei amelim v'einam mekablim schar. Anu ratzim, we run v'hei ratzim. Anu ratzim l'chei olam haba v'hei ratzim leve'er shachat. Yehi ratzon v'nechem n'Elohai v'Elohei avotai. Kishem she'azartanu l'sayim sefer Bereishit, just as you helped us, God, to finish this book. Kein tazreinu latchil sfarim acherim u'lesaymam. Please help us to begin and complete other books. Lilmod ulamed lishmor lasod l'kayim ekol divrei Torah Talmud Toratecha b'hava uzachut kol shelo tamush Torah mipi zariv zera zari ad olam v'yikayim bi b'halecha hatanche otach. B'shach b'cha tishmor alecha b'hakitzotah tisichecha kivi yirbu yamecha v'yosifu lecha shnot chaim or rechamim b'yimina b'smola osher b'chabod Adonai oz lemoetin Adonai varech adamo v'shalom Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemer rabba v'alma dehu atid litchadata u'lachaya mataya u'lasaka lachaya alma u'lemivnei karta d'Yerushalayim u'leshachla hechale begava u'lemekar pulchana nuchra miara u'laata b'pulchana dishmei diatrei v'imlich kud shabri chub u'malchutei v'yikarei b'chaychon v'yemechon v'chaydochol b'Yisrael b'aglav izman kari v'imru ameh hey shemei rabba morach le'olam ameh omaya yibarach v'yishtabach v'yidpar v'shuman v'yidnasei v'tadar v'taleh v'talash v'nikuru shabri chub v'yelam mikol b'chatav v'shuratah v'dav v'nechmatah damaran v'yalma v'imru ameh ha Yisrael v'yal rabbanan v'yal tamidehon v'yal kol tamidehon v'yal kol mandaskin v'yaraita di v'yatra hadein v'di v'chol adar v'yatar yehei lahon l'chon shlam rabba v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin v'zonari v'chav for kanamin kodam v'honi v'shmaya v'imru amen v'hei shlam rabba min shmaya v'chayim tov v'yimalenu v'kol Yisrael v'imru amen oseh shalom v'ramav u'v'rachamav yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Please be seated. Open up Shmot. You cannot do a Siyum without starting the next book.
Could I read it? It's my bat mitzvah.
Yes. And folks, friends, students, we will not have had time for your Divrei Torah, but we're going to make time for that next week, so I want to hear them. But if it's not utterly obvious already, what we are doing is the scene that Rashi plays out at the end of the book of Bereishit, right? Like sitting intimately, our knees locked together, and telling the story, teaching the story, so that our own experience in Exodus and diaspora has a chance of maintaining peoplehood. This actually is what Rashi, I think, fantasized Yosef doing with his great-grandchildren. Chapter 1, verse 1 of Shemot, Ve'ele.
Ve'ele Shemot b'nei Yisrael haba'im Mitzrayma et Yaakov ish uveito ba'u. Reuven, Shimon,
Wait, just one verse. That's all you need.
Just one verse. And these are the names of the children of Israel that came, Ba'im Mitzrayma, that came to Egypt.
Right, pause. What tense is the word Ba'im?
The coming.
Right, it's interesting, right?
That are coming to Egypt.
Right.
Et Yaakov.
What's 8? What does 8 probably mean here in this verse? Probably means with, right?
Yeah.
Right? It can mean direct object, but here it probably means with.
With Yaakov, I would say every man and his household came.
Good.
Come.
Right?
Came.
So we'll linger on this plenty of time next week, but it's a very strange verse. Unless we read the verse as we already know all this information, and we actually know the information that's about to come too. So Rashi's first comment on the book of Shemot, which we will read next week, not this week, leans into what a strange way it is to open a new book of Torah, particularly given the fact that there's no new information here, and there will be no. If you can look quickly, there'll be no new information until we get to maybe verse 6 or 7. Right? In fact, there's almost no information that's new until we get to they became plenty and Yosef enslaved them. Sue.
Well, except that we ended with 2 Pakod Yivkods, and now we're going to Pakod Yivkod them. These are their names. It was him and him and him.
Okay, so Baruch Shekivant, right? Blessed be the one who intended properly, because Rashi offers a version of that. Rashi offers a version of that, which we will get to next week. I don't know, Siman Tov Mazel Tov, Mitzvah Gedola, Torah Hashem Temima. Let's consider this. Let's eat. And did anybody have anything like short and pithy that they wanted to share or say or do?
I just wanted to say I made at 4:00 in the morning the crepe, French crepe. That's what Rashi used to eat in the morning.
Rashi would finish his class with crepes.
And also to share pithy and somewhat ahead of Purim, it's got a Purim spiel vibe to it. But
Yeah.
I thought this year would be no more appropriate venue to share. My son did a comic that created it has the entire story of creation. It's a bit irreverent. It starts with the words "Yo, angel dude."
Yeah.
But I brought some experts to excerpts to share. And
Wonderful.
Just enjoy.
Are they all the same that you're passing around?
Yeah, they're all the same. Yeah, that's for Rabbi Schatz.
How old is he?
Yes. He's 11. He did this when he was in 4th grade, and I've been waiting for years. Like, when can I show this?
Wow.
It's pretty fun.
So let's eat and be merry and Mazel Tov and Yasher Koach in class next week at 8:30 and go team.
Did Moses make the book breaks, or did Chazal do that later?
Bye, Renee. The book breaks between Bereishit and Shemot.
Right. Because Chazal made the Parsha breaks, right? This could have been arbitrary.
Right. Chazal's answer to that question is halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, so it's mosaic.
Okay.
That's also Chazal's way of saying we have no idea how this came to be. Like we don't know the provenance of this, right? In the same way that right, so the chapters are Christian and much later. No, I think Chazal think the Parsha breaks are also like the part. You mean the Petuchas and the Stumas, like where the Torah is open and closed.
Mm-hmm.
The Chazal's answer to that is also halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, right? That it was it's part of Revelation. We have no other way of understanding how it came to our hands looking like this.
Because it easily could have started a new king rose over Egypt.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
That would have made much more sense for this book break.
And remember that Rashi's first commentary on the Torah is asking the question, why does the Torah begin here? It could have been
with the first of months.
Yeah, Chodesh Zalachem. So yes, you could absolutely make the argument that Bereishit should have gone to Haruvi Yishutsu Vayirbu, that they became many Vatimalei Haaretz Otam. End of book. Chazak V'nid Chazek. Vayakom El Chadash.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll discuss that. Why Shemot begins there or not there.
Shkoyach. You have to live to 120. You have no choice. So you can finish the Torah.
That would probably give you enough years.
Gotta make sure you get this one for the road.
Man.
Sal, you probably want to option this. I'll set
Very
you up
good.
with this agent.
Look at that, it's cool looking.
The creation story involves God going to Anawalt to buy the supplies to put the sun and the moon in the sky.
I love it. How old is your son?
He's 11. He did this when he was
beautiful.
9.
Wow.
For years I've been like, I gotta share this with people, but where? So
Well placed fig leaves.
Yes.
Max, good job.
When the story turns to Adam and Cain at the end, it gets a bit dramatic.
Was this for an assignment or just?
No, he just did this himself. He was learning in school and he just, you know.
Oh, Rick, you got competition.
Hey, yo,
Yeah, exactly. Who did?
If you watch Saturday Night Live now, there's that character Chad, and God in here is somewhat of a Chad-like figure who it's just this weird amalgamation of
How old was he?
inspirations. He's 11 now. He did this when he was 9.
I love it. Shkoyach.
Oh my goodness.
Did it himself. We did not spur him on. No.
Does he still look at it? Like, does he remember it?
Yeah. I mean, I try to encourage him to do more, but he's, finds other things to get encouraged by.
That's awesome.
Is Barry still here?
You been good, Sal? Everything's well?
Thank God. Thank God.
What a joy that we all got to do this together.
Yeah. That's cool.
It should just just start making it. Start shooting.
Yeah.
That's the Persian
The Anna Walt trip, I think, is on the next page.
You're reading without food? Alan, very much. Half a snack.
Andrew, can I keep this and read it slower later? Thank you.
That's for the rabbi and Sal.
I'm with you.
Sal, come here.
I'm coming. I just forgot to turn off the recording. I'll get you the audio.